All right, well, we're going to get started. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today for the Power of Storytelling in UX Design. My name is Riley O'Brien, and I am the Executive Director of Think Northwest. Just some virtual programming guidelines that we have for our events. We invite you to keep your camera on so that our speakers can interact with you all during this program. But if you'll remain on mute throughout the program, there'll be chances towards the end to ask questions verbally. We are recording this event so we can provide it asynchronously to our community. Our participants are welcome to introduce themselves in the chat. Tell us where you're from, your title and company, and if you're job searching, please put that up as well. There might be folks who are looking for talent within the room. And then in the chat box, you're welcome to ask questions, respond to the chat to any questions that the panelists put out there to the community. And again, there'll be a Q&A at the end of the event that you can all participate in. I invite you to follow us on social media. This is where you find out more information about what's going on at Think Northwest and the programming that we provide throughout the year to the regional Pacific Northwest marketing and advertising community, and obviously beyond, as we have a whole bunch of folks here from out of state and out of country. So thank you for all for joining us. We have some upcoming events, 2 in person and 1 virtually. We've got our Seattle Extremely Happy Hour on Wednesday, October 12th. We invite you all to come out and join us and network with other folks in the marketing and advertising community. We have an event coming up that's virtual on Wednesday, October 19th called Name Your Price. And it's for folks who are doing freelance work and looking to find out how they can start maintaining their rates at an appropriate price. We've got a really great speaker coming for that one. And then on Wednesday, November 16th, we'll be hosting our Portland Extremely Happy Hour. And we'll be hosting that at SGK here in Southeast Portland. So we hope you all can join us. You can find out more about Think Northwest at thinknorthwest.org, and you're welcome to reach out to me at o'brien@thinknorthwest.org. But I'm delighted to bring this panel together today with our moderator, Sarah Murray, Executive Creative Director with Graybox, and I'm going to let her take it from here. Sarah, it's all yours.
Yeah, thank you so much, everybody, for joining today. So today we're going to be discussing the power of storytelling in UX. And there's so many facets of UX, but if we think about what is a story, most fundamentally, a story is a journey. It has a beginning, a middle, and the end. And if we think about a user's purpose or task, they are trying to overcome obstacles and get to know what they have to know in order to achieve their goal. So if we think about fairy tales as a great example of stories, right? We all know fairy tales. The user task, if you will, is to live happily ever after, right? That's sort of the summation of each. But if we don't have the storyline, if we don't understand the storyline of the user, if we don't present to them that journey in the correct order, they're not going to achieve their happily ever after. So if we think about Cinderella, right? If we start our narrative with already at the ball, she's going to, still be wearing her cinder-covered clothing. She's going to not understand why she's there. She's not going to have the empowerment that the fairy godmother has imparted to her. But if we understand her motivations, that she's dreamed of this ball, and then we put in her storyline the fairy godmother to offer a transformative moment, that's fantastic. She understands why she's going to the ball. But if we don't have the fairy godmother let her know that she has to be home by the stroke of midnight, how will she know that her carriage will be a pumpkin, her dress will be in tatters at the stroke of midnight? And I feel like the end of her story with Prince Charming and her escape from drudgery would have gone very differently. She would not achieve her task as desired, right? She wouldn't get to the end of her story of happily ever after. Similarly, if we don't understand her motivations, her character, when we put out, the representatives of the prince coming with the silver slipper, how would we get her to take the step to say, I want to try it on too, right? So understanding our user, crafting a story that has a beginning, a middle, and the end that provides them the insight they need and therefore the tools they need to accomplish their task, to connect with them emotionally and have empathy for their story is incredibly powerful in UX. So we have a wonderful panel with us here today, and we are going to just have a really great discussion about how they, in their roles as UX leaders in their organizations, are using the power of storytelling to connect with users and build powerful experiences. So going back to our question of story and how we use it in UX, I wanted to ask the panel, what is really a complete versus an incomplete user story? Any of you have any thoughts on that? And please introduce yourselves as you sort of get going. Andrew, did you want to maybe take this one?
Yeah, sure. Hi, I'm Andrew Otwell. I'm the head of UX at a software company called Labkey, where we make software for lab science, like people who pour test tubes into other test tubes and stuff. It's actually a really interesting kind of world of scientific software. I guess when I think of kind of what makes an incomplete or a complete story, I mean, I think your Cinderella example is right on, right? Like there's a hero, there's a central character who wants something, something difficult, runs into some kind of obstacles, and then grows for having met those obstacles or achieved the kind of the motivation outcome, the happily ever after. I think I guess what I've seen often is stories feel incomplete when they seem too easy and straightforward. Everything went great for that person. It went A, B, C, D, E, and it sort of proceeded, and everything worked out fine. Those are the kind of stories that aren't, even if they're sometimes true, they're not very easy to remember. They don't feel like other stories we've ever heard, so they don't have kind of a emotional resonance in our head. But yeah, I think stories. The thing I always think of when I give advice about how to tell a story is like don't invent anything. I mean, the story form is something that we all know. You should follow the way stories work that you already know. If you want to write a story that matches the Cinderella arc, it will naturally feel like a story. So don't leave those things out. Kind of embrace those things.
Yeah, I think you make a really great point. Like, don't leave out the fact that there will be user difficulty, that there will be user failure along their journey. Writing that story for a less than ideal scenario, right? Like, I entered my credit card number wrong the first time.
Right.
Then what happens?
Yeah.
If we don't have the turning back to rags at midnight, it's just went to the ball at the end, and nobody wants to hear that story.
Right.
Any other thoughts about any elements that help make a very complete user story?
I was going to just plus one on the idea of, the lean into convention, right? There's the whole idea of like the Joseph Campbell, the hero with 1,000 faces. These are stories that have been told throughout time over and over again, and people really identify with that. It allows them, an entryway to kind of build empathy and understand the characters. And thinking about UX, I think the other part is the telling part. So we talk about story, we talk about storytelling. The way we tell our story is sometimes, aside from the content, it's the way that we can help our stakeholders and our partners, collaborators build empathy with our users, and also understand where we're coming from a design standpoint. Many times we go through our presentations, we talk about the work we did, we talk about the things that the insights we had, but we don't talk about like what changed, what did we learn, what were the difficulties that we encountered along the way, the things that make it interesting and help people, kind of dive in and connect with what we're trying to do.
Yeah, thank you, David. And I think you bring up a really good point that one of the roles of storytelling in UX is also how we share our insights with the people who are stakeholders within the product, right? How do we communicate to them the narrative arc of user experience, that it isn't just a feature, but an essential function of the user experience to bring the user along sequentially and to offer them things at the correct point in their journey.
Right. And I failed to introduce myself. I'm David Stewart. I am a lead product designer at a company called Hinge Health. We make it's a digital musculoskeletal kind of clinic. It's an app that helps people connect with PT and get exercise therapy and tool to help them overcome pain and get pain relief.
Yeah, thank you, David. And we also have Anuja with us. Anuja, would you introduce yourself?
Sure. Yeah. Hi, I'm Anuja. I work as a senior product designer at Zillow. Zillow is a real estate tech company. We list almost all the houses that are on market in the United States. I work for a team within Zillow called the 3D Home team, and I work on the 3D Home app product, which is a lesser known product than the Zillow real estate app.
Great. And Anuja, what are your thoughts on how storytelling and user emotion connect?
Absolutely. I think user emotion is an integral part of storytelling. Unless you describe what situation or what context that user is in, you won't be able to empathize with the struggles they're going through. So in terms of UX, it's just not about the product. So again, citing your example about entering your credit card number, and failing to do so, what situation was that person in? Were they trying to catch a bus right after that? What frustration were they going through? How can we make it seamless? So unless you understand what situation they are in, you won't be able to really get to, I don't want to call it an ideal solution, but a solution that'll like work for all scenarios. So that's how I think user emotion and storytelling connects.
Right, because what emotion the user is bringing to that moment will change their behavior and change how their interaction proceeds. What are their concerns? Do they actually have the credit card? Did they just have it saved? Did they actually just forget a number, think they have it right? What is their next response going to be based on their emotion? And what emotion will they take away from the product itself? Are they going to continue to gauge, or are they going to give up, if you will? Is Cinderella just going to sit at the hearth and cry and, not go to the ball, if you will? So, how does the UX storytelling serve as that tool for user empathy? Anuja, any more thoughts on that?
Yeah, I can give an example of, let's say you're working on a new feature that you think is really going to help your users, but you're not sure how to pitch it to the stakeholders, right? What you could do is um, you need to get this user in your stakeholders' heads, right? So you need to build that situation for them. So I'm going to cite Zillow in for this. So let's say you're in the market for buying a home. Buying a home can be extremely frustrating, especially if you're a new home buyer. You don't know exactly what you want. You have some kind of an idea, but and you've been through many homes. You see something on the website, you see it's something else when you go there in person. So you need to build that story for your stakeholders. Explain in a way. Let's assume you're a home buyer. You've looked at 10 houses. You only have weekends to look at. How can we make this simpler? And kind of build that scenario for them to really understand the frustrations. Once you've got them to empathize with your user, to understand what frustrations they're going through or the needs, I think it becomes easier to get like that buy-in from your stakeholders. Yeah, not sure if I answered your question, because that helped.
It really does, because I'm thinking about the example you just cited about, a home buyer. Home buyers most oftenly are working people, jobs are most frequently Mondays through Fridays. Whereas if we were just looking at the Zillow product and scheduling open houses, we might say, oh, we want a really good balance of open houses every day of the week because that's a better distribution. But if we're not understanding the user need, which is I need to have the job that allows me to afford the house, we might not design around weekends being the prime spot for those open houses, right? If we're just looking at the product need or the business ideal state, we can design towards what is most convenient for the realtor who also wants to work Monday through Friday. But ultimately, the end goal is for the home buyer, not and understanding the interrelationship of the various users who come into play.
Yeah, I think you articulated that pretty well. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you. David, in your company, what are your thoughts about this? How is UX storytelling serving as that tool for user empathy?
Right. Yeah. And actually, I have some thing I want to show, so I'll share my screen.
Please.
Nothing really elaborate. Just one of the things that I've used in my career to help build empathy with users is narrative sketching. So I just have a couple samples from this is from my work at Amazon, and this is a really powerful tool that I've been able to use in order to not just like show the screen, right? So my work at Amazon was on the Amazon Hub counter project. So if you've ever gone to a Whole Foods and returned something that you bought on Amazon without a package or label, that was the product that I designed and worked to build with my team. And it involves not just a screen and not just one person. It involves a store associate, an end Amazon customer, a driver. There's a physical space, and for me, there's even this idea of somebody, the entire customer journey. So the end-to-end experience, which I'm not showing here, but in a previous panel, Sylvia here orders something. She is going on a trip. She needs it faster than she can get it delivered to her house. So even though those are elements that I didn't work on, it was necessary for me to convey that as part of the experience, just to build empathy for where this user is, what their motivations are, why they're using this product, and what they're doing. And then moving on down, I'm showing, what happens in the back room. How does this interface with these kind of cryptic symbols tie to an actual physical location in the back? What's a benefit that she picks up the travel guide and gets ready for a trip. It also helps with showing like advanced concepts. This is like a wayfinding product that uses kind of AR to help direct a driver to a store that's inside of a mall. Here at Hinge Health, we're talking about physical bodies. We're talking about people who are in pain, people who cannot do the things that we're asking them to. In this sketch, I'm trying to convey the idea that this person's going to have to, in order to do different exercises, they're going to have to change the angle of their phone and put it in a different location to go from the woodpecker pose to a push-up. And that seems like a very minor thing, but it's the team at the time wasn't thinking about that whole process from end to end. And then finally, I think like the result of that, this is something that we just recently discovered through user interviews and user testing. And it ties into this idea of like meeting that user where they are and creating an experience that resonates with them. So our initial design on the left was this big celebration. This is our existing kind of celebration screen in the app. But through talking to users and through doing user interviews and testing, we found the product that I work on is a pain relief device. We found that that it's not really a celebration for them at the end. It's more like relief, or they might still be in pain. So this particular user isn't celebrating a workout complete, and this celebration message on the left wasn't appropriate. So on the right, we've kind of trying to instill some calm and some care into the screen. And so this is kind of the result of looking at that end-to-end user experience, and understanding the user's motivations, where they're coming from, where they're at in their day, what they have next, and then just making a minor tweak to the text to show to give them content that's going to resonate with them, instead of it being maybe I don't think you probably get like somebody would say, oh, I don't like this, but they just might not feel like it connects with them directly. And so for me, that's the big part of it.
And I love what you did here through that user research to understand that the user story needs to reflect back their emotional state, and that, to use a celebratory moment versus a sense of relief or sense of a quiet accomplishment, but knowing there's more to the journey, is to better connect with them, right? Like to over celebrate a moment that is at the very first completion of a workout when you're experiencing back pain, is not to say, okay, the pain's gone now. That would be a celebratory moment, versus understanding how much road they have ahead. I love these drawings so much, also just graphic novels, right?
Yeah.
But I also like the way, through the physicality of the storytelling, in the example of the workout, you've understood something about the way the product needs to function, right? Because of the way that the user needs to interact, you need to ensure that there's features in place that allows it to rotate appropriately. So understanding the user's story may augment understanding the way that a feature needs to be designed. And if you only had a really vertical good display, then there's going to be a breakdown for the user experience.
Right. And actually, yeah. And one of the small note just on that specific thing, what's interesting about this is this started from like leadership feedback that said, why don't we have landscape mode? Right. And, for us, we could have just implemented landscape mode. But the answer really is this longer answer of, yes, we can do that. It also presents these kind of issues for the actual user, where they have to go adjust their phone, and do we want to introduce that? So it's storytelling being used to communicate to leadership and to my partners. Also storytelling to kind of help identify those areas in the app, in the user experience on the screen, that connect to the user's overall journey, and keeping that in mind.
The other piece of insight that I feel like I'm really taking away from these examples, if we look at the van one again, if we think about traditional mapping features, right? When we use Google Maps, generally you arrive at the intersection address or the street address arrival point, and you're there, you've arrived, right? Happily ever after. But by really considering the user's journey, that they're not just going to an address, they're going to a destination within a building. They have to go to a particular place to collect or deliver a package. We're understanding that the typical map is not going to help them. If I show up at, my local mall, I may have another like 10 minutes of movement and needing to know where I need to go to get to the right place, and simply dropping me off at the front door of the mall is not going to get me there. So without that feature, my journey isn't really being completed by my tool, my guide. I'm sort of left near the edge of things, but then there will be even fewer people who could direct me or help me along the way to understand exactly where in this huge building I need to be.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And this came from you riding along with drivers and finding them get lost and not be able to find their way through a building. One last thing that I'll say on this, because I'm taking up a lot of time, is one of the things I get is, oh, I can't sketch, right? Or I can't draw. And this can take many forms. And sometimes even this is not the best way. Sometimes a workflow diagram is the best thing to do. Sometimes an actual narrative, written narrative that goes into a doc is the best way to communicate the story. So that, the sketching is great. I'm lucky enough to have was a fine art major and a painting major before I was a designer. But definitely lots of other ways to visualize this. The important thing is like to tell the complete story of that user's journey, so you can get those insights and communicate their intentions and build empathy with your team.
Yeah, I love that point that you just made about both visuals and writing, because most of us have an origin point professionally or sort of a natural gravitation to writing versus visuals. Very common, of course, in the whole advertising marketing space, right? We have our copywriters and we have our designers, as my writer husband walks out the front door. But what is that balance of roles with design and writing in UX storytelling? Andrew, did you?
Oh yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad you mentioned that, David. You gave us permission not to be good drawers, because I certainly am not. And my kind of origin, kind of point, I think, to what Sarah just said is, writing. I often feel more comfortable kind of thinking in sort of these narrative forms. But a narrative is, I guess, not always, that's not literally the content you might put into your mock-ups or certainly ship on your website. So to have, I can spin out a narrative in text, but that doesn't necessarily mean it can literally be translated to content that's appropriate for a user or to publish on a website. And so working with, real content strategists who understand kind of communication rather than just sort of narrative structures, it has always been super important to me. And anytime I've ever had a chance to work with a real writer, not just someone who kind of types until it looks right, has always been incredibly helpful. Usually
Yeah.
writers are the ones who know how to take words away until it makes more sense, which is fantastic.
I definitely agree. Right now at Graybox, we're working with a division of Purina that, of course, makes pet food, pet product. And, they're so diligent. We work with pet nutritionists and vets. And we are working on some like pet intake information to help customize and personalize their food to optimize their health. But, really going into that language portion, we're trying to develop visualizations of pet health and language around pet health that isn't just accurate for the vets or the nutritionists, because if we give them language that is accurate, if you will, or most descriptive for a vet, for a nutritionist, that isn't language that pet owners use, right? That isn't language that somebody who didn't go to vet school is going to be able to say, yes, that is the condition of my pet,
Mhm.
right? So making sure that the language and the visuals build together, right? That add meaning and understanding, aren't just duplicating each other, but add meaning to each other, but always through that lens of it is for the user, right? It isn't accurate in the sense of whatever canonical subject matter, but communicates most ideally, right? There's got to be that synergy between the two pieces of communication. But just like each of us, right, may have more of our orientation to visuals or more towards language, empowering multiple users to be able to choose their own adventure, if you will, and use the language and or visual that is most meaningful to them, right? Multiple modalities of communication can be so incredibly powerful. David, did you have any other thoughts about the roles of design and writing in UX storytelling? And you're on mute. You win. It had to be someone.
The most important thing is to be unmuted. No, I think that it's I was lucky when I was in high school. I had a great art teacher, Jan Sonnickson, who made us write artist statements about each one of our pieces for everything. And that just instilled in me like the ability to talk about my work. Um, it's a skill that's helped even in my job now where, we're taking people along on a journey, being able to write about your work, it's set the context, and frame the feedback that you want to get is super important. So to me, that's like it's been invaluable. And being able to write is especially at Amazon, which was a very doc heavy culture. It definitely helped a lot. And the uh, the storytelling part of it was something that added to the PRDs and the PRFAQs and all the acronym documents that we created, and gave it a little bit of life. I did want to, Nuha brought up a really good point about, managers thinking that the sketch storytelling would be a waste of time. I've definitely had to work with partners to help them see the value and, more importantly, um, build trust, because it's scary to show like a very sketchy, rough image to like leadership. The good thing is, I'll say this: it is successful. It does work. It's a little scary at first, but once people see the amount of empathy it builds and the amount of context it sets, it's. I've never had a leader go, oh, well, you guys are just messing around drawing comic books. They've they see the value. So I just wanted to make sure that that was a really good point, a good question. So thank you.
Yeah, definitely. So, Anuja, I believe you have some work to talk about that sort of helps exemplify the power of UX storytelling. Would you like to share about that a little bit?
Sure. I can share something that we have on our website, and let's just assume that all of you are my stakeholders, and I'm trying to pitch this to you. To set up some context, what I'm going to walk you through is um, how virtual tours play a part in the home buying journey of our users. Disclaimer, I did not work on this, so please don't give me any credit for this, but I just wanted to share that how this would, if I had to pitch it to our stakeholders and say this is something we should have on Zillow's website, how would that go and how I would communicate that through storytelling. All right, let me share my screen. My monitor is here, so I'm going to be looking this way. All right, so Hannah is a home buyer, and she has been in the market for about 3 months. She and her husband have been looking at homes every weekend because that's the only time that they can go tour homes in person. She looks at homes on several real estate websites, but when she goes to tour a home in person, she sees that it's completely different. Sometimes the lighting is off. Sometimes she hasn't discovered what was behind a particular closet. So one of her friends, she tells her about Zillow, and she tells her that maybe this is the place where you may be able to get to your dream home. Now, Hannah's wondering what is so different about Zillow than other real estate websites. This is the home she's looking at, and she sees that, all right, there are photos. Something that's important to her is the kitchen and the dining space. So she looks at the dining space here. All right, it is next to the kitchen, looks great, but she wonders what's behind that door. And she's also thinking, what if I could open it from here? That's when she notices that there is a 3D home tour here, or a virtual tour, where she can walk through the home. So let's see what she finds out, what's behind the door. Oh, there's a basement here. That's nice. Maybe that's where we could have a game room. I've not seen that before. Now Hannah's wondering how close is the dining room and is it big enough for her family? So she notices that it's connected to the dining room. She likes it when her family is closer to the kitchen because that's where they spend most of their time and have conversations. All right. So now she's wondering where the living room is. Takes her Goes through the hallway and she notices that the living room is right next to the entrance. That's not ideal for her, but it's not the deal breaker. Now Hannah's wondering, what if I could see how they are all connected to each other? She can walk through the home, but what if she could see it from like a high level, from an eagle eyes view? And that's when she sees that there is a floor plan tab also here. Let's see what happens when she clicks on it. So here she notices that she notices how the whole house is laid out. So this is where the kitchen was, and this is where the dining room is. And she notices that the primary bedroom and the bathroom are also on the same level. So she's thinking about her future, and she's thinking, yeah, when I grow older, I don't want to be climbing stairs. So this looks perfect to me. And when I have guests at home, I can have my own privacy because they'll be living upstairs. But now she's thinking, what if I could look at all of this together? So let's go back to a 3D home. And she notices that as she is walking through the home, as she's walking through the home, she can also look at the floor plan view here and understand where she's in the home and from what corner how the home looks. This looks promising. She can see the lighting. She can see how the house is connected. She can look at the layout. Maybe this is a home she wants to tour. And this is how she continues shortlisting homes that she wants to tour, and that's how she is saving on her time and going for the home she thinks is right for her. So that's how I would talk about the story here, about this home and how this home buyer is making decisions. And as you can see, there are a lot of emotions involved here. Like a place where you can sit with your family, thinking about their future, not wanting to climb stairs when you're like older, having your bedroom in the same floor. So this is probably not something that you would put in your product, but it's a story that enables this decision of having a virtual tour on a listing.
One of the things I really love that you did in that demonstration of that story, oftentimes when we're working on a particular feature or functionality, we write a story that is really only about that area of the product, right? And what I saw Anuja doing is that the user, our hero in the story, isn't thinking about it that way. They're just looking for the tool to serve their need. So even in thinking about the 3D tour, you're moving back and forth, right? Just like the user did. You're not constraining yourself by your needs, but you're following the user's story in terms of, okay, I'm integrating this 3D home tour as part of the larger landscape available to me as the user within this journey. People bounce back and forth. They won't go through every room in the house. People work in non-linear ways. They don't care about the 3D home tour the way we care about it, but they shouldn't. It should just be available to them to serve their purposes. So I really love the way that the story that you told was not just examining it from the lens of your task, but instead from the way it would naturally be used in user story rather than your own. So Andrew, you do really interesting things with integrating data into storytelling. Can you tell us about that a little bit?
Yeah, I will share a screen as well. I'm so interested in the stuff that David and Anuja have talked about because I think it's so connected to what I was thinking about here around data, particularly in this case of sort of talking to stakeholders or kind of communicating the work that you did or your team did. And I think maybe for many people on the call, like what you might have done in a previous job as a sort of a case study. How do you talk about the value you added as a designer? These are all stories. But when I think of kind of the data thing, what I think of as statements like this that I hear, all the time at places like Amazon or Zillow, right? Like, these are facts. These are statements about like objective reality, right? Like, there's no stories here. There's just facts. And all we need to have is the facts. And then we'll make the right decisions. And if we give customers the facts, they'll make the right decisions. And those kinds of like beliefs, like tend to sort of, they can close off the feeling that there's more of an emotional story, like the example Anuja just gave, or more of a kind of complicated kind of contextual story like the one that David showed. But without providing a story, people will fill in the gap. They will fill in a story to match the facts that they're given. Like, we do this as people. So as a designer, like, some of what you have the power to do, or a facilitator in a room, or even as a job candidate, I think, like David was saying, sort of to shape the understanding of your listener by providing these stories. I have a couple of examples of these. They're not really visual, and I think some of them are actually fairly simple. But I think it's just interesting to sort of think about in any case where you have kind of data or numbers or metrics, that there is always a story in them that you can tell. And it depends, again, kind of on the context you're doing it. I think about something like we've talked about a couple of times, like making a story compelling with an unexpected moment. There's sometimes interesting facts that emerge out of data. Oh, look, there's a number that's much higher than other numbers. But those don't really have that kind of emotional connection we've started to talk about. We shipped a feature that increased engagement on product pages by 10%. This is kind of like David's, like, we shipped landscape mode. It's like, good job, guys, and there is a story in there, even if it seems uninteresting to you. You can pull out something that makes it more meaningful. We wanted to increase product engagement. We tried ideas that had performed elsewhere, but they didn't work. So we were stumped. Like, the team ran into a problem. Like, we didn't know what to do next, until we saw customers doing something that surprised us. Texting products to compare them, texting things to compare themselves more easily. We realized that we could build a tool that helped them do something they were already doing. That led to the increase in engagement. Like, there's no kind of magic here. This is just doing the work that we do, but telling the story differently from, we shipped a feature that increased engagement. We shipped landscape mode. Like, no one will leave the room remembering what you did, right? But if you talk about, like, hey, we tried as a team to do something we thought was obvious, and it just didn't work until something unexpected happened. That's like the kind of hook that you can sort of provide in a story that people will remember. We failed until we met someone who unlocked a secret. This is a super common story that, like, video games have it, movies have it. Like, the Cinderella story, the fairy godmother, is that kind of someone who unlocks kind of potential. That's like a piece of a story that we all know to listen for, and know that it's meaningful, and then can remember those stories.
And before we move on, a lot of participants today submitted questions before the session regarding, if you're in a job hunt, if you're showing a portfolio, how do you demonstrate storytelling? How do you illustrate that you're capable of storytelling? And I think the very narratives that you include in the write-ups of your portfolio, in your case studies, and in how you talk about the work, these are wonderful ways to demonstrate storytelling innately, versus we increased engagement by 10%, happily ever after occurred, bringing along that project story, that product story into your case studies, into how you talk about the work, is a great place to start with illustrating your capability for storytelling.
Yeah, and how you maybe changed your mind about something, or how you and your team had to work a little bit differently than you thought you had to. Those kind of real world moments. Please, yes, as a design candidate, be able to do wireframes and mock-ups and all that stuff. But, like, if you can talk about things like, oh, I thought I was right about something, but I was wrong, and then that led to a better solution. Or, our team couldn't decide what to do until something happened, and then we were able to figure it out. It's maybe what that is we sifted through a bunch of data, but the kind of the emotional hook is not, we found a number that proved all along that we had to do a certain thing. It's like, Something happened that changed what we thought was going to happen before. I think another really, like, this is maybe the most useful technique I think that I would love to see more people do when they think about kind of data, and especially that word big data, right? Like Zillow, Amazon, millions, hundreds of millions, and tens of thousands, kind of the, 1% numbers are like a million people. Those are very like cool numbers. And I think, it's important to know the scale at which you're working. But they don't have any kind of like personal connection, right? Like they don't mean much to me as sort of they're averages, they're kind of aggregates, and they're not very interesting. But like specific people are super interesting, and that's why Anuja's example of someone kind of touring a potential home. It's not like millions of customers will do sort of approximately this. It's like, no, this one person, Hannah, is doing this, or David's example where one person is doing something. People know how to respond to stories about people, but not about stories about kind of averages. Here's another, this is another thing, you might see in like a bullet point of OKRs at the end of the year. Like, we reduced by 5 minutes the time it takes customers to update their product inventories. Like, yay, good job. Like, sure, that's great. A better way to tell that might be to say, like, how does it matter to someone? We noticed it took customers a long time to update their inventories. We wanted to give them that time back. We made it 5 minutes quicker for the average customer, but meet Julie, who used to spend hours each week updating her inventory. Now it takes her just a couple minutes a day. Here's a clip of her talking about how much that helped her. You can go from big data, millions of people, average 5 minutes, down to one person who's like, yeah, this mattered a lot to me. Maybe this mattered more to this one person than it did to any average person. But she stands out as sort of an exemplar of like why the value matters. Here's a person who it really matters for. Like, here's a person we really want you to walk out of this room thinking like, yeah, we did something useful for Julie. That kind of like zooming down. And I've heard it called small data. Like I've heard people now who are calling themselves like small data scientists. I think it's just such a valuable way of kind of working alongside these kind of huge numbers that you often see at a place like Zillow or Amazon.
And I love where this is going, like really honing in on that single user and the impact for this single user is a great tool for empathy for ourselves as makers, right? And, not all of us are always working on products that we're super naturally passionate about, right? We come into this field for lots of reasons, but one of my favorite stories, and I am forever giving this book to anybody who will let me for them and their children, is the story of Miss Rumphius. And the story of Miss Rumphius is she, she's raised with this philosophy by her uncle, who's a ship maker, that would make the figureheads on ships. That the one thing she had to do in life was to make the world more beautiful, right? And she has this amazing adventurous life. She has her whole journey, and then one day she hurts her back dismounting from a camel, and she's not able to go forth on her adventures anymore. So she retreats to a little house by the sea to recover. And in her recovery, she starts going through on walks across the countryside and walking. It's how she's still connecting with the world. And she goes and she starts spreading lupin seeds, and she makes the world more beautiful in her community. And she becomes known as the Lupin Lady. And I had to actually really do some research to figure out what this book was called, because I was like, yeah, the Lupin Lady, obviously, guys. But if we think about our user empathy to that small data of the user story, we are making the world more beautiful for an individual. We are helpers in the world. We are making someone's day a little brighter, and not just living behind the anonymity of a prototype or a wireframe. We are making that world more beautiful.
Yeah, and it's a good way to remind us that we have kind of an actual obligation to individuals. It's easy to kind of lose sight of, oh yeah, millions of people and most of them click the right thing. That's kind of fine. But like when you think of them as individuals, like you have a real, genuine kind of ethical obligation to sort of think about individual outcomes. Like, and I think, that changes the perspective from kind of a number in a spreadsheet column for sure.
Yeah. What do you think about this, David? Mute.
You muted.
I'll figure it out this again or someday. I'm going to take some classes on how to use computers. But I loved Anuja's example, the way that she told her story, and then Andrew, the way that you're, kind of interjecting emotion into these stories about data. Uh, Really, to me, it's the big thing is it creates a connection and makes it memorable. I've definitely I've used the narrative storytelling with slide presentations, and it's great when you um, have somebody say, "Oh, yeah, well, Sylvia wouldn't do that, or Hannah wouldn't do that, or Hannah would do this, or oh, remember Hannah had this issue with, she wanted to see the lighting in this room." It's great when you see your partners and leadership kind of
Adopt those things. Yeah.
adopt that language, and you can see or hear visually there both. I guess both they can see it and hear the way that they're building empathy for their users. And that, I think, that to me, that's the biggest I think takeaway that I'm getting from hearing from you and Anuja. So that's great stuff.
Yeah, and I want to make sure that each of you, no matter what your precise discipline is, if we look at the types of work that David, Andrew, and Anuja have shared, David's told it with, truly visual storytelling, graphic novel-esque user stories. And Anuja was able to give us just a product demo, and her verbalization of what she was doing and why she was doing it was an example of storytelling. And then Andrew, very much for the executive perspective, just via presentation and a few words on the screen. But there's so many ways to implement storytelling. I wanted to just take a few minutes as we're wrapping up. Did anybody want to ask the panel any questions today? Anything that you would like answered? Just go ahead and raise a hand emoji, or you've all hit your happily ever after.
Or just put it in the chat if you want. Oh. That's another option.
Yep. Well, I'm just
go ahead and Minal has a question. Minal, if you want to unmute and ask that question.
Yes. Hello, everyone, and thank you so much, first of all, for doing this. Actually, I wanted to ask, I am actually new to UX, and I am currently going through some interviews. When I present my work as sketch, my lo-fi designs as sketch, they ask me that, do I know to work on Miro or not, or things like that. So what is better, working on Miro or some software and showing the work, or doing sketches?
I mean, the answer I would usually give is, technology is table stakes, right? It's really the thinking behind it. And if they're asking you just a really straightforward technology question, you can always add a section to your resume so you sort of preempt any technology questions. Another way I like to answer that question is I'm very adaptable to new platforms if it's one you haven't used before. David, what are your thoughts?
My rule is the fidelity should always match the thinking. So a lot of times showing something higher resolution can dictate the feedback you get. It can make something look like you've thought through it more than you have. So a sketch is a way to make something look a little more open to new ideas. I've had people give me feedback on color and logo when we weren't even in that spot yet. I've had folks or I've had even myself, I've forgotten about entire edge cases or flows because I was so focused on the pixels. So I think using the different technology is something you can add to your resume and talk about. But for just specifically sketching, to me, it's actually the roughness and unfinished look is an actual benefit.
Thank you.
And Andrew, then we have another question in chat, and maybe you could take this one. In your opinion, is storytelling a universal skill that should be mastered not only by UX designers, but also by product owners, project managers, and developers? What are your thoughts on that?
A universal skill, it should be mastered. I don't know if that'd be great, I guess. I mean, I think that it's very hard to even. I'm imagining even a developer who's like been given a database migration project and has to sort of encounter some of the kind of things we've been talking about, executive presentation, or how would you describe it if you're interviewing for your next job? Completed database migration successfully, like that's good, happily ever after. But I think all of us would benefit from thinking of these opportunities to tell a story, even if it's just in a few words, about why does it matter? Why was it hard? What changed for me during this process? Maybe doing this database migration, I had to learn something I hadn't learned before, and it was a particularly hard challenge, or I had to work with someone who I had never worked with before, and there was, we didn't necessarily work together immediately very well. All of those moments, I think, offer opportunities to, tell stories, and in a way, I think it's almost impossible to avoid telling some kind of story. I don't know if I would say everybody has to master it. I certainly think. I mean, I think what we've heard a couple of times today here is like using story techniques to kind of plant the seeds of empathy, or even literally the vocabulary that you want your stakeholders or partners or users to take away. If you hear somebody saying back to you, the name of the user, like David was saying, or kind of the outcome that you wanted them to kind of take away from it, that's so successful. Like you've kind of planted this idea in someone's mind that is influencing how they think. So it's just so kind of incredibly useful at so many levels. I really want to respond to that question about the tools, because I see that so much on the job market now, which is just like people who are like, yeah, do you know this tool or this tool or this tool? Kind of practically speaking, I think for most people, the safest answer is like, yeah, I know all those tools. Find a way to learn that thing quickly if you need to sort of justify it. But like, I think it's super unfair to be putting, kind of these like, oh, do you have 3 years of Miro and 2 years of Figma as kind of these sort of job requirements that I see. They're filtering out an awful lot of people. The tool question is also a great opportunity, if you can kind of make use of it, to say like, there was a time when I had to learn how to use a new tool in order to get something done. And here's what happened to me. Here's how I think about learning new tools. Here's how I think about when to apply the right tool to the right job. Those don't always have to be in the context of your kind of UX work or your marketing work, but something that happened to you in your life. I just think like it's one of the sort of worst questions that's out in the market right now, is like, do you have this many years of experience with this particular piece of software? And if no, then reject.
It's very much the wrong question.
It's totally the wrong question. I would love to ask someone the question of like, tell me about a time when you had to learn a new tool in order to communicate an idea or solve a problem, and how did that go? Maybe it was a circular saw. I had to build a deck. Those things say more about you and real world challenges than any, yes, I, clicked buttons in Figma for 4 years in a row. It's not always easy to kind of turn the conversation around to that, but if possible, like there's such interesting stories to tell about how you use tools and when, that I think are worth trying to tell if you get the chance.
Definitely. Thank you. So Nathan asked, what are some ways you handle the ambiguity of your role, right? It's like you can do anything, but you can't do everything. When the data or the research story isn't crystal clear, how do you just keep moving forward towards, delivering a product, delivering a feature?
I was going to say, that happens all the time. And, you know, you don't get what you want out of the user test or looking at analytics or whatever. And I think the only true way would be to, you know, like do more, right? Get more data, do more user research. However, that's not always possible. And sometimes you just have to move forward and try something. And the important thing is just to understand if it's a one-way or a two-way door, or if it's a sliding glass door. But no, you just want to make sure that, is this going to be a decision I'm going to be able to come back to and undo if I have to. If it isn't, I might want to say, hey, everybody, we got to stop and get more data before we continue. However, if it's a two-way door, I can always undo it. Let's go ahead and try it. Let's try an experiment. Let's iterate on this later on.
Yeah,
so
you can always do, you know, variants that are reflective of various assumptions you might be making. Like, the outcome could be this or that. Maybe they're going to want to use Anuja's 3D tool in isolation, or maybe they're going to want to use it integrated into the whole perspective across the house and all the data. So maybe let's design it either to work plurally and allow the user to choose, or let's test variants at the user testing phase, or launch it multiple ways behind a feature flag and see what works then. There's other ways to get information without letting it stop you. So I want to thank everybody for joining today. You guys have been such a wonderful people in joining us in our story today, in telling you a bit more about our experiences with storytelling. For me, the key takeaway is that all of you are already storytellers. You are already connecting with your users with empathy. And I think recognizing the ways that you are already doing storytelling and amplifying that and finding the way that works for your voice, whether you're doing it in presentations, if you're doing it through you know, narrating a product demo, if you're doing it through beautiful sketchings, you are already doing storytelling. This is not to suggest that the power of storytelling is something you can acquire. It's more a statement that you are already doing this. And just giving consideration to the fact that you're already doing it and how you can try out new ways of doing it if you can bring intention and purpose to the way that your storytelling works for you, will only amplify the way you're doing it already.
And I want to thank, on behalf of Think Northwest, Sarah and Anuja and Andrew and David, for being a part of our programming today. Sometimes I just reach out to people randomly and say, hey, do you want to participate? And they say yes. And so I'm so grateful for them giving their time and talent to us. We have an event that's coming up on October 19th. It's virtual. It's with Kate Dixon. Name Your Price. This will be available on our website and through our YouTube. What I understand right now is, I've been working on the back end, is that our website's down. So we're working on getting that back up. So come look for us tomorrow when hopefully we'll be back up and running. But thank you again, everybody, for participating. And we hope to see you at future Think Northwest events.
Thank you.
Riley.
Thank you so much.